When I was a little girl, probably we can start at 5 and work on up. We used to love to go to my mother's bed early in the morning, and there's several stories involving going to Mama's bed, but the early one was crawling in bed with her and having her tell us a Mickey Parker story. And I don't know, I kind of remember that Mickey Parker, there was a real Mickey Parker, and he was on a train going with my mother and me to Portland. And we were friends. Obviously, we had a friendship, tiny one, two little kids. But I remembered the name, Mickey Parker, and she did too. And so she managed to pull together the first of our bedtime stories, early morning bedtime, and they were all about Mickey Parker. Well, what was so exciting about Mickey Parker, he no longer was the little boy on the train with me. He became Mickey Parker, whose father was a fisherman. And Mickey Parker lived on a boat with his family. Now that was exciting. And on that boat, they had a cat who loved the tuna fish. They'd have tuna quite often. For what reason, not I know. But anyway, aside from the cat, living on Mickey Parker's father's boat gave him an opportunity to learn an awful lot about the islands in and around Seattle, because Mickey Parker was actually Seattle boy. And their boat was up in the Puget Sound, up in the beautiful areas of that part of the country.
Was it Astoria, Oregon, or Puget Sound?
Puget Sound.
Hmm.
Or where?
Astoria.
Oh, Astoria.
I don't even. You went down on the Columbia River.
No,
At
Mickey
the
Parker
mouth.
was not on the Columbia.
Astoria, Oregon.
He,
At the mouth of the river, isn't it?
no, so Mickey Parker, then, being the son of a fisherman, had all the luxury of time to himself and playing on the boat and living on the boat and having up and down steps and in and out of little passageways. The boat was very comfortable, though tiny, but nonetheless, there they were, exploring the Pacific Northwest. They particularly loved to, on days off meaning when his father wasn't fishing. Now this is something that Mats knows all about, so he knows that part of the story. My part is that Mickey Parker wanted to get about and see things, and so every chance to get off the boat, every chance he had, he grabbed for it. And he took an opportunity when folks came to be on the boat with them. They had room on their boat and could have people on board occasionally. And if the guests wanted to take off, he was right there with them, ready to show them where. And so they'd go in Mickey Parker's fantasy world, but I'm sure it was real. They'd go across the sound to an island that looked so exciting and foreboding. exciting because it was far away, and also mysterious because there wasn't much about that island to know about. And so he was definitely in the wanting to know about it. So he did finally get these people that came to visit one day to go on over across to that island. Oh my gosh, where do they pull the boat in? They had to scoot all around the edge till they finally found a little area where they could dock their boat, climb up the rockway, hillside, and get up there on top. Now what was on top? That was the fun. And that's what Mickey Parker could see from where he lived. He could look across and see up there. And we wondered, he wondered. I didn't even care. I was just along to tell the story. But we wondered if strange people or strange things or strange happenings took place up on that island that they could barely see. And the strange part of it was that they could see lights on the island from time to time. And the lights were bright enough, and lights that people could see by or have. Was not a fireplace, was not a bonfire or a campfire. It was just a light, like people were living on that island. So endlessly wondering, finally they got across to that island and up on that hill. And it was absolutely stunningly gorgeous. And what was up there was a campground. And the campground was the reason for the lights. But the campground was maintained by the government and used privately. People could rent. They had to be really, you don't get to rent just because you're wanting to. You have to be approved. And so people that were allowed onto that island and up in that part of Washington had to be approved of. So Mickey didn't. This was really a whole new adventure. So that light up there turned out to be a campground, and the campground was for those workers that were allowed time away from their job to have a vacation, to have a private time with their family, and that they had enough facility, cooking space and little cottages where they could put out a sleeping bag and have a real vacation, which was very rare for most people. People that were working daily on a income that came every 2 weeks and a paycheck to paycheck, we called it. Those folks didn't know what vacation meant. So here they were, able to go to that island, if approved of, and have a little vacation, get one of the cottages. And here was the situation that was really stunning for Mickey. What he wanted to know was, who were the people that lived on that island when he wasn't, when there weren't people around? Were there people living on the island? He could see lights from time to time, and he was caught up in that mystery of it all. Oh my goodness, it was such a time for him to figure out how he was going to get over there. And he did make it, as I already pointed out. And what he found out was, indeed, that this was a very special private campground, only operated only by the government. And they allowed people to go to that island. So Mickey had to then figure out with his family, because they living on a boat, how he could cajole himself into getting to go over there and spend a night or two. Now that had to be a challenge. If you didn't have a lot of pull with the government, you weren't, or whoever was in charge, you had to go another route, figure out, okay, would he do a trade, or would he go? He would do the right thing, of course. He went to the person in charge of that nighttime light that he kept seeing. In other words, in charge of that island. And as it turns out, the people that lived on that island had lived there for many, many, many years. This was their home. They were Indian, Native American Indians, and they were very kind and loving, but also didn't want people on their island. This was where they belonged, and they wanted it to be private and quiet and their own. And of course, that kind of thing today is difficult, because people never, if they find something they like a beautiful little spot, like that was, they wanted to own it, they wanted to have a part of it, they wanted to really expose it. Well, that just wasn't going to work, because those people living there were not going to allow it to be exposed. So when you came near that island after dark, you were in deep trouble. They would not allow you on the island, and if by chance that you threatened them, they were quick to come right back and let you have it, either by their favorite thing to do was throw big bottles of water, drown people, threaten them with water, because they knew they couldn't use guns. That just wasn't working. It wasn't their philosophy. So you can imagine the few water fights went on, entering their island and their space. But the people were American Indian, and they were very loving people, and they did not want to live on an Indian reservation. They wanted to live where they belonged, and that's to be admired, because we treated our Indians very poorly. We herded them onto reservations. Native Americans, this is so hard to believe that we would treat people in this way, herd them into living on reservations and places that weren't necessarily desirable, and there was not much for them to do once they got there, but try to exist. So the story is that island was a refuge, and no one dare go near it if you didn't want a water fight. Water balloons coming down on you. It's really rather amusing, isn't it? Because we don't fight those kind of fights. We're more serious. But yet, think about how serious that fight was. That we had driven the Indians onto what we called reservations, Native Americans, who had every right to every spot of our country, and yet we put them into reservations and said, okay, now you just exist. I know there are many stories that help us understand, but Mickey Parker did not want to, he just couldn't deal with that at all. So he made it his point to spend as much time as he could with the Indians on reservations, bringing them movies, bringing them books, giving them what the government was trying to give them, but the one thing they couldn't give these people they pushed onto the reservations was love. So here he was with his beautiful little warm tender heart saying, I've come bringing you gifts. As they say, as the story goes, I come bringing gifts. He came bringing books and education. He did a remarkable job of educating those people so they could be more prepared for entering life outside of the reservation, which had to be. Finally, they were relieved of life on the reservation, allowed to move out and on with their lives, but it was people like Mickey Parker that brought it to the attention of the world. And what a wonderful love. Brotherly love. What's Mickey Parker doing today? Well, Mickey Parker has a boys' school, and he's teaching these boys who are Native Americans. He's opened a school and is training them and teaching them the ways of the world, our world, preparing them to get into the flow of life off the reservation. And will it work? It's working. There are people out there now who are carrying his message of love and care. Now this Mickey Parker is a special person. That's only one story, but it'll start us off, won't it? Her story exists almost as though it were spiritual, and that you could hear him talking to you, saying, this is the way it was, this is how we did it, this is what life was about, and you almost feel like you can hear him telling you the story, even though you're bringing it up. Your mind is working to try and stay close to him and make sure that his story is told. Our stories